Hey guys, tonight we are taking a slow, meandering trip back in time, drifting through the misty canals of the 17th century Dutch Republic. We're heading for Amsterdam, the richest, busiest, and most peculiar city on the planet in the 1630s. And just a gentle, friendly warning before we begin. You probably wouldn't survive this era. The complete lack of antibiotics, the questionable street food, the fact that your dentist would also be your barber. It was a tough time. Frankly, the dentistry alone would do you in. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always love to see where everyone is listening from, so feel free to drop your city and your local time in the comments below. It's a wonderful way to feel connected as we all unwind. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the damp. It's not an aggressive, rainy damp, but a persistent, gentle mist that clings to your clothes and makes the air feel heavy and ancient. You're seated in a small, sturdy canal boat, a scoot, gliding through the water with a soft, rhythmic lapping sound. The boatman at the stern, a silent figure in a woolen cap, pulls you forward with practiced ease, his movements slow and deliberate. The water of the canal isn't clear or blue. It's a dark, murky green-brown, reflecting the overcast sky like a shattered mirror. It smells of salt, wet earth, and the faint, sweet scent of distant wood smoke. You've left the chaotic energy of the outer harbor behind, where the great sailing ships of the Dutch East India Company rest at anchor. Their masts, a skeletal forest against the gray clouds. Now, you are entering the city's heart, its intricate network of canals that serve as both streets and arteries. This is the famous Grachtengordel, the Canal Ring, a masterpiece of urban planning and the circulatory system of a global empire. Wealth from Asia, Africa, and the Americas flows through these watery veins, and you can almost feel the thrum of commerce in the air. The buildings that line the canal are impossibly tall and narrow, leaning against one another as if for support after a long night of revelry. Their gabled facades, ornate and varied, press into the sky. It seems the primary architectural principle here is optimistic leaning. You learn later that this isn't just charmingly haphazard design. Property taxes were calculated based on the width of a building's canal frontage, so merchants built upwards, not outwards, creating these slender, towering homes. A brilliant, if slightly precarious, form of tax avoidance. You notice that near the peak of each gable, a thick wooden beam with a large hook juts out. This isn't for decoration. It's a hoisting hook, used to lift furniture, spices, and all manner of goods to the upper floors, since the staircases inside are perilously steep and narrow. The idea of hauling a four-poster bed up the side of a 5-story building seems both ingenious and terrifying. As your boat glides deeper into the city, the sounds change. The cries of gulls are replaced by human noises. You hear the sharp clatter of wooden shoes on cobblestones, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the unintelligible shouts of vendors hawking their wares. Merchants in dark, sober clothing stand in doorways, their faces stern and calculating, while sailors, with weathered skin and calloused hands, unload barrels from flat-bottomed barges. Women in crisp white bonnets and aprons scrub their doorsteps with a furious energy, their movements a stark contrast to the leisurely pace of your boat. It's a city of contrasts. Immense, almost obscene wealth lives side by side with grinding labor. The air is thick with the scent of money-exotic spices, like nutmeg and clove, the rich aroma of tobacco, the salty tempts of herring butt. It's also layered with the smell of coal smoke and the damp, musty odor of a city built on marshland. While this place is famous as a haven of tolerance and free thought, you can see the unwritten rules etched into the very fabric of the city. The wealthy live in the grand houses along the main canals. while the workers and artisans are tucked away in the smaller, intersecting alleyways. Historians still wonder just how deep this celebrated tolerance ran, or if it was more a practical byproduct of a city that needed every skilled hand it could get, regardless of origin or belief. Asterisk, the light begins to fade, and the sky softens to a bruised purple. Lanterns are being lit in the windows of the houses, casting warm, flickering squares of gold onto the dark water. The reflections ripple and distort as your boat passes, making the city seem like a dream. There's a quiet sense of purpose here, a feeling of immense, coordinated effort. Every person you see is part of a complex machine, a global engine of trade, that is, for this brief moment in history. Centered right here in this damp, crowded, remarkable city. Your journey is just beginning, but you already feel the pull of this place, its strange and potent magic. The boatman grunts softly and uses his pole to nudge the vessel toward a small, wooden dock. With a gentle bump, your ride comes to an end. You have arrived. You thank the boatman with a nod and step onto the solid, reassuring cobblestones of the dock. They are slick with moisture and worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The air here, away from the open water, feels a little warmer, trapped between the tall brick facades. You begin to walk, your footsteps echoing softly in the narrow street that leads away from the canal. This part of the city feels different. The boisterous energy of the commercial wharves has been replaced by a hushed, wealthy quiet. The houses are even grander, their windows larger and made of clearer, more expensive glass. You are now walking alongside one of the main arteries, perhaps the Herengrecht, the Lord's Canal, where the city's most powerful and affluent citizens reside. Asterisk, there are no market stalls here, no sailors shouting, no fishwives haggling, just the occasional clip-clop of a horse pulling a stately carriage and the low murmur of conversation from behind closed doors. You get the distinct feeling that too, live on this street, one must have a net worth that could fund a small war. The people you pass are dressed in fine, dark wool and silk, their postures rigid with self-importance. They don't scurry, they proceed. Their expressions suggest they're perpetually calculating interest rates or composing stern letters to underperforming business partners. Asterisk, as you continue your stroll, you notice a small gathering of people up ahead. They aren't clustered in a rowdy mob, but rather in a loose, respectful semicircle on the opposite side of the street. They are all looking intently at one of the houses. It's a magnificent building, of course, 5 stories of dark red brick, with elegant white sandstone trim. But it's not the house itself that has captured their attention. They are all staring at a single window box on the second floor. Asterisk, you slow your pace, your curiosity piqued. You try to look casual, as if you see small, silent crowds staring at window boxes every day. From this distance, you can't quite make out what they're seeing. You cross the street, finding a small gap in the group of onlookers, and follow their gaze. There, in a simple, unadorned terracotta pot, sits a single flower, asterisk, and it is unlike any flower you have ever seen. It's a cup of fire and snow. The petals are a creamy, buttery white, but they are streaked and feathered with the most intense, impossibly deep crimson. The lines are not messy smudges. They are sharp, intricate flames licking up the edges of each petal, creating a pattern of breathtaking complexity. It stands on a single, proud green stem, its form perfect and symmetrical. The flower seems to pulse with a life of its own, a vibrant jewel against a muted backdrop of the brick and the gray evening sky. You're looking at the 17th century equivalent of a masterpiece sculpture displayed on a front lawn. Asterisk. 2 men standing beside you are speaking in low, reverent tones. One, a portly man with a magnificent mustache, shakes his head slowly. A viceroy, he breathes, the name spoken with the same awe one might reserve for a king. I heard he paid 3,000 guilders for the bull. Asterisk, his companion, a leaner man with shrewd eyes, lets out a low whistle. 3,000. A man could buy a fine house on a good canal for that. Asterisk, you do a quick, silent calculation. A skilled craftsman in this city, a carpenter or a mason, might earn 300 guilders in a good year. 10 years of hard labor for one flower in a pot. The idea is so preposterous, it almost makes you want to laugh. But the solemnity of the crowd stops you. They are not admiring a simple plant. They are witnessing a spectacle of wealth so extreme it borders on the divine. Asterisk, this, you realize, is the famous tulip. You had heard rumors, of course, whispers of an exotic flower from the far-off lands of the Ottoman Sultan. A thing of such rarity and beauty that men were willing to pay fortunes for it. But hearing about it is one thing. Seeing it is another. A widely accepted fact of this era is that these flowers were the ultimate status symbol, more potent than fine silks or rare spices, because their beauty was alive, and therefore tragically temporary. Asterisk, what's truly quirky is how they are displayed. Back where you come from, flowers are for gardens, for fields, for big, cheerful bunches in a vase. Here, this single bloom is presented alone, isolated and elevated like a sacred relic. Was asterisk why? The image of that single flame-streaked tulip stays with you, a vivid splash of color against the city's sober palette. You find yourself wondering about its origins. Such a perfect, almost artificial-looking thing couldn't have just sprung from the damp Dutch soil. It feels ancient, exotic, like a secret carried on the wind from a faraway land. To understand its power over these people, you realize you need to trace its journey, to follow its roots back through time and across continents. Asterisk, and so, the bustling canal-laced streets of Amsterdam begin to dissolve. The scent of salt water and coal smoke is replaced by something drier. The chatter of Dutch fades into the melodic, flowing sounds of Turkish and Persian. Your mind drifts eastward, carried on the trade winds that brought the first tulip bulbs to Europe. You are traveling back, not just in space, but in time, to the heart of the mighty Ottoman Empire. Asterisk. You find yourself standing in a magnificent garden in 16th century Istanbul. This is not a quaint European garden with neat, orderly flowers. This is a paradise on earth, a paradisa designed for pleasure and contemplation. Fountains burble softly, their waters catching the brilliant sunlight. Intricate tile work in shades of cobalt and turquoise adorns the walls. The air is heavy with the scent of jasmine, hyacinth, and roses. Here, under the shade of cypress trees, courtiers in flowing silk robes and elaborate turbans stroll and converse in hushed tones. Asterisk, and everywhere there are tulips, but they are not the flared, flamboyant flowers you saw in Amsterdam. These are smaller, more delicate, their petals slender and pointed, curving upwards like the tips of daggers or the elegant strokes of calligraphy. The historical fact here is undeniable. The tulip was not a Dutch flower. It was originally a wildflower from the mountainous steppes of Central Asia, areas of modern-day Kazakhstan and Afghanistan. Nomadic Turkic peoples first discovered it, admired its simple beauty, and brought it with them as they migrated westward. Asterisk, in the Ottoman Empire, the tulip, or lali, was not just a flower. It was a sacred symbol. Its name, written in the Arabic script of the time, used the same letters as the word for God, Allah, making it an object of religious reverence. It was also a symbol of wealth, power, and the divine beauty of the Sultan's court. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent was a great patron of the arts and of horticulture, and under his reign, tulip cultivation became a refined and highly respected pursuit. Gardeners, known as lalazer, were esteemed artists, competing to breed the most beautiful and perfect specimens. Asterisk, you wander through the garden, observing these early tulips. You see deep, blood-red varieties, sunny yellows, and pure, snow-white ones. A quirky, lesser-known detail is that the Ottoman ideal of a perfect tulip was vastly different from the Dutch one that would emerge later. The Ottomans cherished tulips that were slender, almond-shaped, and had needle-sharp petals. Solid, pure colors were considered the most beautiful. The dramatic, color-breaking patterns that would later drive the Dutch mad were seen here as flawed, impure, and generally undesirable. It's a fascinating twist of taste. The very thing that one culture dismissed as a defect would become the obsession of another. Asterisk. As you watch the courtly gardeners tending to their precious flowers, you see how much care is lavished upon them. They are not simply planted in the ground and left to grow. They are cultivated in special pots, their soil carefully prepared, their watering precise. The gardener kneels, gently wiping a speck of dust from a single petal with a soft cloth. This isn't agriculture, it's devotion. Asterisk. Historians still debate the exact route the first tulip bulbs took to get from the Sultan's gardens to the shores of northern Europe. Was it a gift from one diplomat to another? Were they carried by merchants along the Silk Road? The most popular story, though perhaps a little too neat to be entirely true, credits a man named Ogier de Busbecq, the ambassador of the Habsburg Emperor to the court of Suleiman around 1554. He supposedly saw the flowers, was captivated by their beauty, and sent a few bulbs back to the imperial gardens in Vienna. From Vienna, they made their way to a botanist named Carolus Clusius in Leiden, Holland. Clusius was a brilliant but notoriously grumpy academic who guarded his rare bulbs jealously, refusing to sell them for any price. Frustrated locals, eager to possess the exotic new flower, supposedly stole some bulbs from his garden under the cover of night, and thus, the tulip was introduced to the Dutch public. Asterisk. You imagine that nighttime scene. A few shadowy figures, hunched over in a stern professor's garden, carefully digging up a few onion-like objects, not for food, but for beauty. It's a quiet, almost comical beginning to a story that would soon spiral into a nationwide economic mania. You see now that the tulip arrived in the Netherlands not just as a plant, but as a story. It carried with it the allure of the exotic East, the mystique of the Sultan's court, and the thrill of rarity. It wasn't just a flower. It was a vessel for dreams of faraway lands and immense wealth. Asterisk. Standing in this peaceful Ottoman garden, surrounded by the quiet hum of bees and the soft scent of blossoms, it is impossible to imagine the chaos this humble flower will soon unleash. Here, it is a symbol of peace, of divine beauty, of a life ordered by contemplation and refinement. Soon, in a different land, it will become an object of pure, frantic speculation, a symbol of greed, risk, and the dizzying, terrifying heights of human desire. The journey has just begun. Asterisk. Your mental journey returns you to the damp, gray reality of Amsterdam. The scent of jasmine and Turkish coffee fades, replaced once more by the familiar aromas of the canal with stone, herring, and money. The story of the tulip's origin has given you a new appreciation for the flower in the window box. It's not just a plant. It's a traveler, a refugee from an imperial garden, an immigrant that has found fertile, if rather hysterical, new ground. Asterisk. You turn away from the small crowd, which is now beginning to disperse as the evening deepens, and continue your walk. Your path leads you to a bridge over a smaller, quieter canal. As you cross it, a door to one of the grand canal houses opens, spilling a warm, buttery light onto the cobblestones. A man in a dark, expensive-looking coat is bidding farewell to a guest. He sees you looking, and instead of the suspicious frown you expect, he offers a polite, almost imperceptible nod. He is a merchant, you surmise, in his late 40s, with a face that suggests both shrewdness and a quiet satisfaction with his place in the world. Asterisk. Let's call him Willem. Perhaps he is feeling generous tonight, or perhaps he mistakes your curious gaze for the look of a fellow connoisseur. For whatever reason, he beckons you closer, with a slight gesture of his hand. "A fine evening," he says, his voice smooth and calm. "You were admiring the Viceroy down the way, I take it. A respectable flower, but not the finest. Not by a long shot. Asterisk, you are invited inside." You step over the threshold, leaving the cool, misty evening behind and entering a world of domestic opulence. The first thing you notice is the floor. It's a checkerboard of black and white marble tiles, polished to a mirror sheen. The air inside is warm and smells of beeswax, spiced wine, and the faint, pleasant scent of a wood fire crackling in a nearby hearth. This is the entrance hall, the Voorhuis, a semi-public space where business was often conducted. Asterisk Willem leads you deeper into the house, through a heavy oak door and into the main reception room. The wealth here is not gaudy or ostentatious. It is solid, sober, and absolute. The walls are covered in dark, gilt-stamped leather, a luxury item imported from Spain. The furniture is made of heavy, dark oak, intricately carved and polished until it gleams. A massive cabinet of curiosities stands against one wall, its many small drawers filled with exotic shells, dried insects, and other wonders from the far corners of the globe. This was a hallmark of the Dutch Golden Age Homa miniature museum to showcase the owner's worldliness and wealth. Asterisk. And then you see the paintings. Every available space on the walls is covered with them. This is a well-documented historical fact. The Dutch of this era were obsessed with art. Even modest households often owned several paintings. But these are not modest paintings. You see luminous landscapes, dramatic seascapes with storm-tossed ships, and incredibly detailed still lifes. In one, a half-peeled lemon sits next to a gleaming silver goblet. Its skin, so realistically rendered you can almost smell the citrus. In another, a skull rests beside a guttering candle and an overturned hourglass of Anita's painting. A reminder that all this earthly wealth is temporary. A little piece of grim reality to contemplate while you count your money. Asterisk Willem gestures to one of the still-life paintings. It's a magnificent floral arrangement, a riot of color featuring roses, irises, and lilies. And right in the center, more vibrant and detailed than all the others, is a single, perfect, flame-streaked tulip. "My Semper Augustus," he says, a note of profound pride in his voice. The painting, of course, not the bulb itself. An actual bulb of that quality. Well, that would be a king's ransom. He says this with a small, knowing smile, as if discussing the purchase of a small country. Asterisk, this is another quirky, lesser-known detail of the era. Many merchants who couldn't afford the most legendary bulbs, or who owned them but wanted to enjoy their beauty year-round, would commission hyper-realistic paintings of them. These tulip portraits were a status symbol in their own right. An artist might be hired to paint a flower at the peak of its bloom, capturing its unique pattern for posterity. It was a way to possess the flower's beauty without the risk of it wilting or the bulb rotting in the ground. Asterisk, you look closer at the painting. The artist has captured the flower with breathtaking precision. You can see the delicate veins on the petals, the almost imperceptible dusting of pollen on the stamen. It's beautiful, but it's also a strange concept to own a portrait of a flower. It speaks to the level of obsession. These tulips were not just plants. They were celebrities, each with a name, a reputation, and a market value that fluctuated like a modern-day stock. Asterisk Willem continues his tour, pointing out a rare porcelain vase from Ming Dynasty China, a beautiful Persian rug covering a large table, and a globe of the world that shows the latest discoveries from Dutch explorers. Everything in this house tells a story of global trade. The wood for the furniture might be from the Baltic, the leather on the walls from Cordoba, the spices and the wine from the Moluccas, the pigments in the paintings from Afghanistan. This house, you realize, is a nexus point, a place where the entire world has been gathered, curated, and put on display. Asterisk historians still puzzle over the psychology of this new merchant class. They were famously Calvinist, biased, sober, and hard-working, and their faith preached modesty and frowned upon excessive displays of wealth. And yet, they lived in houses like this, filled with the most luxurious objects imaginable. How did they reconcile this apparent contradiction? Was it a form of cognitive dissonance? Or did they view their wealth not as a personal indulgence, but as a sign of God's favor, a tangible reward for their diligence and virtue? Looking at Willem's proud but not boastful demeanor, it seems to be the latter. He sees this opulence not as extravagance, but as the proper, righteous order of things. Asterisk the tulip, you now understand, fits perfectly into this world. It is the ultimate curiosity, a rare and beautiful object brought from a distant land. It is a work of art created by nature, but perfected and monetized by man. In this quiet, elegant room, surrounded by the spoils of a global empire, the madness of paying a fortune for a single flower bulb starts to make a strange kind of sense. It is the ultimate expression of a world where everything, even beauty itself, has a price. You follow Willem from the grand reception room into a smaller, more intimate space at the back of the house. This room overlooks a long, narrow garden, a sliver of green hidden from the public gaze of the canal. The air here is cooler, filled with the scent of damp earth and greenery. This is the heart of his private world, his hortus conclusus, or enclosed garden. It's where his most precious treasures are kept, not in a vault, but in the soil. Asterisk, the garden is meticulously organized. Raised beds are laid out in a precise geometric pattern, each containing rows of leafy green shoots reaching for the weak afternoon sun. This is Willem's floral laboratory. It is here that he cultivates and nurtures his collection of tulip bulbs. Even now, in the growing season, there are no flowers in bloom. The famous blooms of a tulip last only a week or two in the spring. For the rest of the year, all this wealth, all this potential beauty, lies dormant underground, a hidden promise sleeping in the dark earth. Asterisk Willem points to a particular bed, marked with a small, hand-painted wooden sign. The name on the sign is Admiral van der Eyck. A fine admiral, he says, his tone that of a proud father. The offsets from this one bulb alone should fetch a handsome price next season. He explains the basics of tulip propagation. A mature bulb, after flowering, will produce one or two smaller daughter bulbs, or offsets. These offsets are clones of the parent bulb and will produce an identical flower. This slow, natural rate of reproduction is one of the key reasons for the bulb's scarcity and high value. You can't just plant a seed and hope for the best. The process of creating a valuable new bulb takes years. Asterisk. You look at the neat rows of green leaves and try to imagine the fortune they represent. It's like looking at a field of sleeping dragons. Then, your eye is drawn to a small, separate bed in a sheltered corner of the garden. Here, the leaves look different. Some are mottled with pale, yellowish streaks. They look unwell. Ah, Willem says, noticing your gaze. You have a keen eye. Those are my broken ones, my most valuable. Asterisk. He leads you over to the sickly-looking plants. This, he says, with a dramatic pause, is where the magic happens. He explains that the solid-colored tulips, while lovely, are considered common. They are for the uninitiated, the true connoisseur, the man of taste and discernment. Desires the broken tulips, the ones with the extraordinary flame-like patterns and feathered stripes you saw earlier. The Viceroy, the Semper Augustus, the Admiral, all are broken bulbs. For decades, the cause of this beautiful breaking was a complete mystery. This is a solid historical fact. It wasn't until the 1920s, almost 300 years later, that scientists discovered the truth. The spectacular patterns were the result of a virus, specifically the tulip-breaking virus. Asterisk. The virus infects the bulb and interferes with the pigment-producing mechanism in the petals. It causes the flower's base color to be suppressed in irregular patterns, allowing the underlying white, or yellow color of the petal to show through in those fantastic streaks and flames. The beautiful patterns are, in essence, the symptoms of a disease. Willem and his contemporaries had no idea. They believed the breaking was a spontaneous, unpredictable act of nature, a sort of floral alchemy. One year, a plain red tulip might bloom. The next, its offset might miraculously produce a flower of dazzling red and white. They called this transformation rectification. Asterisk, this ignorance led to some wonderfully quirky and superstitious beliefs. Gardeners would try all sorts of bizarre methods to encourage their plain tulips to break. They would mix special potions into the soil, use pigeon droppings as fertilizer, or even, according to some tales, place paintings of beautifully broken tulips in front of their plain ones, hoping the flowers would be inspired to change. It's a charmingly absurd image, a stern Dutch merchant setting up an art gallery for his plants. The virus also had a darker side. While it created beautiful flowers, it also weakened the bulb. An infected bulb would produce fewer and smaller offsets, and eventually the line would die out. This is what made the most prized varieties, like the legendary Semper Augustus, so astronomically rare. The very disease that made them beautiful was also slowly killing them. Each Semper Augustus bloom was a miracle, a fleeting moment of perfection on a path to decay. It adds a layer of beautiful tragedy to the whole affair. Asterisk historians still debate how much these growers intuitively understood about the process. Did some of them notice that the most beautiful flowers came from the weakest plants? Did they suspect that the breaking was a kind of sickness? Or did they truly believe it was a sign of divine or artistic intervention? Willem, for his part, speaks of it in mystical terms. One cannot force a break, he says, looking at the mottled leaves with a mixture of reverence and hope. One can only provide the best soil, the best care, and pray that God or nature sees fit to bless the flower with a noble pattern. Asterisk, you look from the healthy, robust leaves of the common tulips to the pale, sickly leaves of the valuable ones. The entire market, the entire mania, is built on a foundation of pathology. These rational, God-fearing men of commerce were gambling fortunes on the beautiful, unpredictable symptoms of a plant disease. They were trading in sick flowers. It's a perfect metaphor, though they couldn't have known it at the time. The stunning beauty they so desired was inextricably linked to weakness, instability, and decay, a premonition, perhaps, of the fate of the market itself. The secret to the tulip's beauty, it turns out, was also the secret to its doom. Asterisk, asterisk, leaving the strange, quiet intensity of Willem's garden behind, you feel a need for something a bit more lively. He bids you farewell at his front door, returning to his world of silent calculations and patient horticulture. You step back out onto the street, where the evening has now fully settled. The sky is a deep indigo, and the light from the lanterns dances on the wet cobblestones. The hushed reverence of the wealthy canal district begins to feel a little stifling. You crave the noise and energy of the common folk. The places where fortunes are not just cultivated in private gardens, but are won and lost in public. Asterisk, your ears guide you. From a few streets away, you hear a rising tide of boisterous noise, the unmistakable sound of dozens of men talking, shouting, and laughing over the clatter of tankard. You follow the sound down a narrow, winding alleyway and find its source, a tavern. A simple wooden sign hangs above the door, bearing the image of a frothing mug of beer. This isn't one of the refined establishments for the wealthy elite. This is a place for sailors, craftsmen, and aspiring merchants. The windows are clouded with steam, and the air that spills out is thick with the smell of beer, pipe smoke, and fried food. Asterisk, you push open the heavy wooden door, and are immediately hit by a wall of sound and heat. The room is packed. Men are crammed shoulder to shoulder on wooden benches, gathered around rough-hewn tables. The air is so thick with smoke from their long clay pipes that the back of the room is lost in a gray haze. A barmaid, her face flushed with exertion, navigates the chaos with a tray of foaming beer mugs held high above her head. It's loud, it's messy, and it feels wonderfully, chaotically alive. Asterisk, you find a small space at the end of a crowded bench and slide in, nodding to the men beside you who barely seem to notice your arrival. They are engrossed in a heated conversation, their voices rising and falling with passion. And as you begin to tune in, you realize they are not talking about shipping routes, or politics, or the price of herring. They are talking about flowers. Asterisk. This is one of the most fascinating and historically documented aspects of Tulip Mania. Much of the trading, especially as the frenzy reached its peak, didn't happen in a formal stock exchange. It happened here, in smoky backroom taverns like this one. These informal trading sessions were known as colleges, and they operated with their own peculiar set of rules and rituals. A man might come in with a list of the bulbs he owned, and over several rounds of beer, he would negotiate their sale for the coming season. Asterisk, you watch a group at the table next to you. A florid-faced man who looks like a butcher is holding court. He pulls out a small leather-bound notebook and a piece of chalk. 2 bulbs of Gouda, he announces, his voice booming over the din, and 1 prime Switzer, who will open the bidding. The men around him lean in, their expressions a mixture of greed, calculation, and the false nonchalance of seasoned gamblers. Asterisk, what's truly quirky and lesser known is the mechanism of this trade. They weren't trading actual bulbs. The bulbs themselves were safely in the ground, months away from being ready to be dug up and delivered. Instead, they were trading promissory notes, handwritten contracts on scraps of paper, for bulbs that they had never even seen. This was a futures market, one of the first of its kind in history, and it was being conducted by ordinary men in taverns. They called it wind handle, literally, wind trade, because they were selling nothing more than the wind. It's a fantastically blunt and accurate term for what was happening. They were trading in promises, in hot air. Asterisk. You spend what feels like hours in the tavern, nursing a single mug of beer and soaking in the electric atmosphere. The haze of pipe smoke grows thicker, the voices louder, the bids more audacious. Men who look like they've worked with their hands their entire lives are casually throwing around figures that would have once represented a decade of wages. It's intoxicating and a little terrifying to navigate this chaotic world. You realize you need to learn the language. Asterisk, the names of the tulips being traded are a pageant of Baroque grandeur. They are not simple, botanical names. They are titles, honorifics, declarations of status. Listening to the traders shout them across the room is like hearing a roll call for an imaginary army of aristocrats. This is a well-known historical fact. The most valuable tulips were given elaborate, often militaristic or classical names to enhance their prestige and marketability. Asterisk. You hear them call out for a General Maelstrom and an entire fleet of admirals, Admiral Leaf, Admiral de Man, Admiral Van Horn. These admiral bulbs were a specific category, often named after prominent Dutch naval heroes or the growers themselves. Then there were the generals, the colonels, and even a Scipio Africanus, named after the great Roman commander. It was brilliant marketing. You weren't just buying a flower bulb. You were acquiring a general for your garden, an admiral for your collection. It imbued the humble, onion-like object with a sense of power, history, and importance. Asterisk, as you listen more closely, you begin to pick up on the subtle hierarchy of these names. The most valuable and sought-after tulips were the bezoars, which had a yellow ground color with streaks of red, brown, or purple. Next came the roses, with a white ground feathered with shades of rose, pink, or crimson. The violets or biblomens, which had a white ground with lilac or purple markings, were also highly prized. The solid-colored tulips, the selfs, were at the bottom of the pyramid, often referred to as drek by the serious speculators. They were the raw material, the blank canvas upon which the valuable breaking might one day occur. Asterisk, a truly quirky and lesser-known detail is the sheer poetic creativity that went into some of the names. Beyond the military titles, you find names that are pure flights of fancy. A particularly beautiful specimen might be christened Papagaï Parrot for its vibrant, multicolored feathers. There was a La Veuve, the widow, likely a somber-hued flower of deep purple and white. There was even a gherkin. Why anyone would name a flower of breathtaking beauty after a pickled cucumber is a mystery that has been lost to time, but it speaks to the playful, almost folk-art nature of the naming process. It wasn't a scientific system. It was a collaborative storytelling project. Asterisk, you watch as a man at a nearby table proudly presents a piece of paper, a contract for 3 bulbs of incomparable de Holland, he declares. The name itself is a sales pitch. Who wouldn't want something that is, by its very definition, incomparable? Asterisk, historians still debate the significance of this naming convention. Was it simply a clever marketing ploy to create brands and drive up prices? Or did it reflect a deeper cultural mindset of the Dutch Golden Age of society that saw itself as a powerful, world-striding nation, bestowing grand titles upon its natural treasures, just as it did upon its naval heroes? It's likely a bit of both. The names created a sense of order and classification in a market that was, in reality, pure chaos. It gave a veneer of scientific rigor and connoisseurship to what was essentially frantic gambling. Asterisk, you begin to understand the psychology at play. If you tell someone you've just spent 500 guilders on an onion-like plant bulb, you sound like a fool. But if you tell them you've acquired a rare admiral of admirals, you sound like a sophisticated investor, a patron of the botanical arts. The language transformed a commodity into a collectible. It allowed people to justify their own reckless behavior to themselves and to others. Asterisk, the tavern continues to buzz around you. A dispute breaks out at one table, 2 men arguing vehemently over the lineage of a particular bulb, whether its break was consistent, whether its offsets were strong. They sound like horse breeders discussing bloodlines. The flower has been anthropomorphized, given a personality, a history, a family tree. It's no longer just a plant. It's a character in a national drama. Asterisk, by the time you finally decide to leave, the grand theatrical names are ringing in your ears. Semper Augustus, Viceroy, General Ball. They are more than just labels. They are incantations, words of power that have convinced an entire nation that a mottled flower bulb is the most desirable object on earth. You step out of the smoky tavern and back into the clean, cool night air, your head swimming with the strange poetry of the tulip trade. The language is a key part of the spell, and it seems that everyone, from the richest merchant to the humblest weaver, has fallen under its influence. Asterisk, the next morning, the weak sunlight filters through the perpetual Dutch mist, giving the city a soft, ethereal glow. The memory of the tavern, the smoke, the noise, the feverish energy feels like a strange dream, but the feeling it left behind is very real. A nagging, persistent curiosity. You've seen the tulips, you've heard the stories, you've learned the language. Now, a part of you, the small, irrational part that whispers terrible financial advice, wants to be part of the story. You want to feel the thrill of the trade. Even in the smallest way, you decide to visit the flower market, the Bloemenmarkt asterisk. In the 1630s, it wasn't the floating tourist attraction it is today, but a bustling, chaotic marketplace on the single canal, where growers, florists, and speculators gathered. The air here is fresh and fragrant, a welcome change from last night's tavern. Stalls are piled high with common flowers, roses, carnations, irises, but they are just the opening act. The real business is happening in the quieter corners, where men huddle in small groups, their conversations low and intense. Asterisk, you wander through the market, Feeling like an outsider, you see professional florists, the real connoisseurs, examining bulbs with a practiced eye. They weigh them in their palms, check for mold or soft spots, and discuss their merits in a technical jargon you don't understand. These are the serious players, the men who supply the wealthy collectors, like Willem. Then there are the speculators, the florissants, men from all walks of life, who have abandoned their usual trades to gamble on tulips. You see a baker, his apron still dusted with flour, negotiating with a man who looks like a lawyer's clerk. This is the mania in action. Asterisk, you feel a growing, reckless desire to participate. It's not about getting rich. It's about understanding. You decide you will make one small trade, a single, cautious investment, to feel the pulse of the market firsthand. You approach a less crowded stall, run by a man with kind, crinkled eyes and dirt under his fingernails. He looks like a genuine grower, not a fast-talking speculator. His stall isn't flashy. He has a few wooden crates of modest, solid-colored bulbs, and a small, handwritten list of the more valuable varieties he has for sale. Asterisk, just looking, he asks, his voice gentle. Asterisk, you confess that you're new to this, and are looking to buy a single, promising bulb, something small. He smiles, a knowing, paternal expression. It gets in your blood, doesn't it? He says. Be careful, son. The wind blows hard these days. Asterisk, this interaction highlights a historical fact. While the market was filled with greedy gamblers, it was also populated by genuine horticulturists and flower lovers, many of whom were swept up in the economic frenzy against their better judgment. They were the ones who had been cultivating these flowers for decades, long before the prices went mad. Asterisk, the grower shows you his list. You see the familiar, grand names, with prices that make your heart skip a beat. But then he points to the bottom of the list. If you're starting out, he advises, you don't want an admiral. You want something common, but with good potential. A good, strong self from a family known to break. He explains that buying an already broken bulb is expensive. The clever money, he suggests, isn't buying a cheap, plain bulb from a variety that has a reputation for producing beautifully patterned offspring. It's a lottery ticket with petals. He points to a name on the list. Boterblow Master Scott Buttercup, a common yellow variety. The price is 5 guilders for a single bulb. It's not a trivial amount of money, it's a week's wages for a laborer. But it's a world away from the thousands being paid for a viceroy. This is your entry point. Asterisk, a quirky, lesser-known detail of the trade was the unit of weight used for the most valuable bulbs. The AAS, or an oz, was about 1/20th of a gram. The rarest bulbs weren't sold by the bulb, but by weight, like precious jewels or saffron. A single Semper Augustus bulb, weighing just a few hundred ossen, could be worth more than its weight in gold. Your humble Boterbloem, thankfully, is sold by the piece. It's too common to merit the jeweler's scale. Asterisk, I'll take one, you say, your voice firmer than you feel. Asterisk, the grower nods and reaches into a crate filled with what looks like ordinary onions. He selects one carefully, turning it over in his hand. He hands it to you. It's it, asterisk. Days turn into weeks. You hold on to your small, precious Boterbloem bulb, a secret little gamble tucked away. You haven't planted it. The season is wrong. For now, it is just an object, a token of your participation in this strange economic fever. You spend more time in the taverns and markets, not as a trader, but as a listener. The stories you hear are growing wilder, more incredible, escalating with a logic of their own. The collective delusion seems to be feeding on itself, becoming stronger and more detached from reality with each passing day. The prices are no longer just high, they are astronomical. You hear a story about a sailor who was visiting Holland for the first time. He saw a particularly fine-looking bulb sitting on a merchant's counter, and mistaking it for an onion, he pocketed it to have with his herring for lunch. The bulb was a priceless Van der Eyck. When the merchant discovered it was missing, he raised the alarm. The sailor was found, mid-bite, and was promptly arrested and thrown in jail. This story, though possibly exaggerated, became a famous cautionary tale, a historical fact often repeated to illustrate the sheer value attached to these bulbs. An onion worth more than a man's freedom. The anecdotes you collect become more and more absurd. You hear of a single bulb of Viceroy being exchanged for a full basket of goods, 2 lasts of wheat, 4 lasts of rye, 4 fat oxen, 8 pigs, 12 sheep, 2 hogsheads of wine, 4 tons of beer, 2 tons of butter, 1,000 pounds of cheese, a complete bed, a suit of clothes, and a silver beaker. The list is so specific and so varied, it sounds like a child's fantasy of wealth. Whether this exact trade ever happened is debated by historians, but the fact that the story was told, and, more importantly, believed, shows the state of the public mind. Then, you hear the story that seems to represent the absolute peak of the madness. It's a tale told in hushed, awestruck tones in a corner of a tavern. It concerns a man who owned a magnificent house in Haarlem, a city just a short journey from Amsterdam, and another epicenter of the tulip trade. The house was his life's work, his family's security, the brick-and-mortar symbol of his success. But he was consumed by a desire for one thing, the rarest of all flowers, the Semper Augustus, the always august or ever noble tulip. It was the unicorn of the tulip world, a flower of perfect form, with deep carmine flares on a pure white ground. At the height of the mania, it is said that only a dozen or so bulbs were known to exist in the entire country. The man found a seller who owned one of these legendary bulbs. The price was 3,000 guilders, a fortune, but the man didn't have that much cash. So, he made an offer. His house, his grand, comfortable house, in exchange for one single, dormant tulip bulb. The deal was made. He traded his family's home, their shelter, their entire worldly security, for an object that would fit in the palm of his hand, an object that could rot, be eaten by a mouse, or produce a disappointing flower. You try to imagine the scene, the signing of the deed, the handing over of the keys, the moment the man holds the small, brown bulb, feeling its weight, telling himself that he is holding something far more valuable than the roof over his head. You picture his family's faces, their confusion and fear. It's the kind of decision that transcends greed. It's a leap of faith into a new kind of religion, a belief that this flower held a value that was mystical, almost infinite. A quirky, lesser-known aspect of these high-stakes trades was the role of public notaries, to lend an air of legitimacy to these increasingly bizarre transactions. Contracts were drawn up and officially witnessed. You can picture the scene. 2 men sitting in a notary's office, the air smelling of sealing wax and dry paper, formally documenting the exchange of a townhouse for a flower bulb. The notary, a man of sober legal practice, has to keep a straight face as he affixes his official seal to a document that seems to have been written in a madhouse. This raises a question that historians still grapple with. What did people think the value of these bulbs actually was? Did the man who traded his house believe he could sell the bulb's offsets for even more, and eventually buy 2 houses? Or was the desire for the object itself, for the prestige of owning the rarest flower on earth, so overwhelming that financial logic ceased to apply? Was it a speculative bubble, or was it a mania of status, a possession obsession of the highest order? The story of the house suggests the latter. It points to a moment when the symbol became more important than the substance, when the idea of the tulip was worth more than a literal home. You find yourself walking past the grand houses on the Herengracht again, looking at them in a new light. You see them not just as homes, but as assets, as chips in the great tulip game. How many of these stately facades, you wonder, were secretly mortgaged or sold to fund a flower obsession? The city suddenly feels less stable, less solid. It feels like a stage set for a grand, collective hallucination. The story of the house for a bulb marks a turning point in your mind. This is no longer just a fascinating economic phenomenon. It's a human drama, a quiet tragedy unfolding one absurd transaction at a time. The top of the market has been reached, a peak of such dizzying, irrational height that the only way left to go is down. The story of the house traded for a single bulb lingers in your thoughts, a stark illustration of an obsession that has tipped over into something dangerous. It makes you want to get away from the frantic, abstract world of the tavern traders and their wind handle. You want to see the flowers again, or at least, the people who actually work with them. The growers who understand the soil and the seasons. You decide to visit one of the commercial nurseries on the outskirts of the city, in the looser, more rustic landscape, where the urban grid gives way to fields and windmills. Asterisk. You find your way to the workshop of a man named Jan van de Velde. Not a historical figure, but an archetype of the master florists of the time. His nursery is a sprawling, muddy affair, a series of long, low greenhouses and neatly tended fields. But you are not here to see the fields. You have been told that he possesses one of the most beautiful tulip books in all of Holland. Asterisk. You are led into a small, well-lit workshop attached to his house. The room smells of linseed oil, paper, and dried plant matter. A large wooden table dominates the space, littered with brushes, small pots of pigment, and vellum sheets. Jan, an older man with paint-stained fingers and a magnifying glass hanging round his neck, is hunched over a large, leather-bound volume. He looks up as you enter, his eyes sharp and appraising. After a brief, formal introduction, he agrees to show you his book. Asterisk. He handles the volume with the reverence a priest would show a holy text. He lays it on a clean cloth and unties the leather straps that hold it shut. As he opens the cover, you understand why. This is not just a catalog. It is a work of art. Asterisk. Page after page is filled with exquisite, life-sized watercolor paintings of tulips. Each painting is a masterpiece of botanical illustration, rendered with almost microscopic detail. The artist has captured the precise curve of each petal, the subtle variations in color, the delicate, powdery texture of the bloom. This is a well-documented historical fact. These painted catalogs, known as tulip books, were a crucial tool of the trade, since tulips only bloom for a very short period in the spring. Growers needed a way to showcase their wares to potential buyers year-round. The tulip book was the solution. It was a portable garden, a silent salesman that could display the beauty of a general maelstrom in the dead of winter. Asterisk. You lean closer, mesmerized. On one page is a stunning viceroy, its white petals feathered with violet so finely it looks like frost. On another, a fiery bazaar, its yellow ground slashed with brilliant orange and deep purple. Beneath each painting, the name of the tulip is written in elegant, curling calligraphy. Sometimes, the weight of the bulb and the price it last fetched are also noted in the margin. The book is a ledger, a price list, and a portrait gallery all in one. Asterisk. A quirky and lesser-known detail about these books is that they were often commissioned from famous artists. Painters who are now celebrated for their landscapes or still lifes, like Judith Leyster or Ambrosius Boesthart the Younger, would take on commissions to paint for these catalogs. It wasn't seen as lesser work. It was a prestigious and lucrative assignment. This meant that many tulip books were unique, handmade objects of immense value, coveted by collectors in their own right. Some were even painted on vellum, a fine parchment made from animal skin, which gave the watercolors a special luminescence. Asterisk. Jan turns the pages slowly, his pride evident. An artist from Haarlem, a very talented man, he murmurs, pointing to a particularly fine illustration. He spent 2 weeks here last spring, just to capture the bloom of my Gouda at its peak. He understands the light. Asterisk. The book is also a tool of subtle deception. The paintings show the flowers in their most perfect, idealized state. There is no hint of the virus that causes their beautiful patterns, no sign of the weakness or decay that inevitably follows. The blemishes are edited out, the colors are perhaps a little more vibrant, the forms a little more perfect than in reality. It is the 17th century equivalent of a glossy seed catalog or a filtered social media post. It sells the dream, not the reality. Asterisk, this leads to a question that art historians and economists still ponder. Did these beautiful books help fuel the mania? By creating such perfect, seductive images of the tulips, did they intensify the desire for them, making the real, imperfect flowers seem even more magical? Did they create a feedback loop where the paintings drove up the price of the bulbs, which in turn made it more worthwhile to commission even more elaborate paintings? It seems highly likely. The books transformed the tulips from mere agricultural products into objects of high art and refined taste. Asterisk, you look at Jen's hands, the dirt ingrained in his knuckles, the calluses on his palms. He is a man of the earth, but in his workshop, surrounded by these delicate, masterful paintings, he is also a curator, an art dealer. He bridges the two worlds, the muddied practical world of horticulture and the abstract high-stakes world of the art market. His book allows him to sell a flower that is currently just a lump of brown matter sleeping in a field a mile away. He is, in the truest sense, selling an idea. Asterisk, as he gently closes the cover of his magnificent book, you feel you have seen a crucial piece of the puzzle. The mania wasn't just about greed or speculation in the taverns. It was also about beauty, about art, and about the power of a perfect image to capture the human imagination. The tulip books were the engines of desire, translating the fleeting, fragile beauty of a flower into a permanent, portable, and infinitely desirable form. Leaving the quiet, art-filled workshop of the nurseryman, you make your way back towards the heart of the city. The beautiful, idealized images from the tulip book are fresh in your mind. They represent the mania at its most seductive, a world of perfect flowers and ever-rising prices. But as you walk, a different feeling begins to creep in. It's a sense of unreality, a quiet unease. The whole enterprise feels stretched, like a thread pulled to taut. The stories are too wild, the prices too fantastical. You start to wonder how long something so disconnected from the solid ground of reality can possibly last. Asterisk, you decide to avoid the boisterous taverns tonight. Instead, you seek out a coffee house. These were relatively new establishments in Amsterdam, places where merchants and intellectuals gathered to drink the fashionable new Turkish beverage, read the first newspapers, and engage in more sober and serious conversation. The atmosphere inside is a world away from the beery chaos of the tulip trading inns. It's quiet, filled with the low murmur of conversation and the rich, dark aroma of brewing coffee. The smoke here isn't the thick, sweet haze of pipe tobacco, but the more exotic, incense-like scent of Turkish tobacco smoked in hood. Asterisk, you find a seat in a dark wooden booth. At the table next to you, two men are engaged in a quiet but intense discussion. They are not the florists or weavers you saw in the tavern. These are men of substance, dressed in the dark, immaculate clothing of the regent class. They look like bankers or shipping magnates, their faces etched with the permanent caution of men who deal and risk for a living, and they are talking about tulips, but their tone is not one of breathless excitement. It is one of deep, growing concern. Asterisk, it is a madness, the older of the two men says, swirling the dark liquid in his small porcelain cup. A sickness of the mind. I saw a baker from my district yesterday. He sold his business, everything, to buy a single bulb of some ridiculous admiral. He knows nothing of flowers. He thinks he will be a rich man by summer. He will be a beggar. Asterisk, his companion, a younger man with sharp, intelligent eyes, nods in agreement. It is the wind handle, he says, using the term with clear contempt. This trade in paper promises, it is not real. No goods are exchanged, no real value is created. It is a game of fools passing scraps of paper back and forth, each one hoping to find a greater fool to sell to before the music stops. This conversation reflects a crucial historical fact that is often overlooked in the more sensational tellings of the story. Not everyone was caught up in the mania. There was a significant, if often quiet, contingent of sober-minded citizens, government officials, and conservative merchants who viewed the whole affair with alarm and disdain. They saw it for what it was, a speculative bubble, or what they called at the time, a Geckenwork, a fool's game. The older man leans forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The problem, he says, is that the real money is now entangled with the fool's money. Men are mortgaging their homes, their businesses, their shipments of spice, to gamble on these flowers. When this bubble bursts, and it will not just be the weavers and bakers who are ruined. The contagion will spread. This is a quirky, lesser-known aspect of the final stages of the mania. As prices skyrocketed, a new financial instrument was supposedly introduced: options. Buyers could pay a small percentage of a bulb's price to secure the right to buy it at a fixed price in the future. This allowed even more people with less capital to get into the market, leveraging their small stakes into massive potential gains, or catastrophic losses. It was pouring gasoline on a fire. The conversation you are overhearing is the first crack in the facade. It's the voice of reason, a sound you haven't heard in the taverns or the marketplaces. These men are discussing the tulip trade, not as a magical opportunity, but as a systemic risk. They are looking at the network of credit and debt that underpins the entire Dutch economy, and seeing how this floral obsession is warping it, destabilizing it. The younger man takes a slow draw from a pipe. And what is the true worth of these things? He muses, almost to himself. A flower. It blooms for a week, then it dies. It is a thing of passing beauty. We have taken a simple pleasure of the garden and turned it into an idol of greed. It is against nature. It is, I fear, against God. This moral and religious dimension is a question historians still debate. How much did Calvinist morality play a role in the eventual backlash against the tulip trade? The church leaders had begun to preach sermons against the mania, calling it a form of idolatry and a distraction from a righteous, hard-working life. Did this moral condemnation help to prick the bubble, or was it a reaction to a collapse that was already inevitable for purely economic reasons? Listening to these men, it seems the economic and moral anxieties are deeply intertwined. The trade is not just financially unsound, it is spiritually corrupting. You sit in your booth, the coffee growing cold in your cup. The words of these men are like a splash of cold water. They have articulated the vague sense of unease that has been growing within you. They have given a name to the feeling of unreality. Windhandle, trade and win. For the first time, you find yourself thinking not about the glorious rise of the tulip's price, but about its inevitable, terrifying fall. What will this city look like when the music stops? What will happen to the baker who sold his business? What will happen to the man who traded his house? The conversation next to you ends. The two men finish their coffee, pay their dues, and leave, melting back into the respectable, orderly world of high finance. But their words hang in the air, a quiet prophecy of doom. The seed of doubt has been planted. The fever, for you, at least, is beginning to break, replaced by a chilling premonition of the crash to come. The quiet, ominous conversation in the coffee house shifts your perspective. You are no longer watching a thrilling spectacle of rising fortunes. You are waiting for a fall. The air in Amsterdam feels different now, thinner, pregnant with an unspoken tension. The boisterous confidence in the taverns starts to sound brittle, the laughter a little too loud. The frenzy is still there, but it is now tinged with a desperate, manic edge. Everyone seems to be aware, on some subconscious level, that the party is almost over. Asterisk. The end comes not with a thunderous crash, but with a deafening silence. It happens in early February of 1637. The historical record points to a specific event, a routine auction of tulip bulbs in the city of Haarlem. You feel a pull to be there, to witness the moment the tide turns. You travel a short distance from Amsterdam to Haarlem, a city that has been just as consumed by the mania. The auction is to be held in a guild hall, a large, drafty room with a high timbered ceiling. Asterisk, the room is packed. It's the same cast of characters you've come to recognize. The florists, the speculators, the merchants, the artisans who have staked their life savings on the trade. But the mood is different from the boisterous tavern colleges. This is a formal auction. There is an auctioneer, a clerk, a sense of official procedure. Yet beneath the formality, the air is thick with nervous energy. Men whisper to each other, clutching their notebooks, their faces tight with anticipation and anxiety. They are here to see if the prices will continue their impossible climb. Asterisk, the auction begins. The first few lots are for common, low-value bulbs. They sell quickly, the prices meeting expectations. A low murmur of relief ripples through the crowd. The market is holding. For a moment, it seems your premonition of doom was just a fit of melancholy. The madness, it seems, has more life in it yet. Asterisk then, the auctioneer announces the prize of the day. A single bulb of Zwarte Kroon, the Black Crown, a highly regarded variety. It is not a Semper Augustus, but it is a valuable, desirable flower. The opening price is called 1,200 guilders. The room falls silent. The auctioneer scans the faces in the crowd, his gavel held ready. 1,200 guilders. Do I have a bid? Silence. A heavy, profound silence that seems to suck all the air out of the room. A few men cough nervously. Others shuffle their feet on the wooden floorboards. No one raises a hand. No one shouts a bid. The price, which just a week ago would have seemed like a bargain, now hangs in the air, sounding absurd, impossible. Asterisk, the auctioneer, his professional composure starting to crack, lowers the price. 1,000 guilders then, a fine bulb at 1,000 guilders. Asterisk, more silence. It is a thick, solid thing, a wall of collective, unspoken agreement. The spell is broken in this single, silent moment. Everyone in the room seems to have arrived at the same terrifying conclusion at the exact same time. The price is not real. The emperor has no clothes. The bulb is just a bulb. Asterisk, this moment, or one very much like it, is the historical turning point. While Tulip Mania was a complex phenomenon without a single cause, this Haarlem auction in February 1637 is widely cited as the bursting of the bubble. It was the first time that sellers came to sell, but no buyers came to buy. Asterisk, the auctioneer tries one last time, his voice now pleading. 900 guilders, a steal. Someone must bid. The silence holds. A man near you lets out a slow, shaky breath. Another wipes a sheen of sweat from his brow. The shared delusion has evaporated, leaving behind only the cold, hard reality. The scraps of paper in their pockets, the promissory notes for which they have paid fortunes, are suddenly, terrifyingly, worthless. Asterisk over. You return to Amsterdam the next day. The news of the Haarlem auction has preceded you, spreading through the city like a fever in reverse, a chilling wave of panic. The bustling, confident metropolis you first arrived in is gone. In its place is a city gripped by a quiet, desperate fear. The change is palpable. The noise of commerce is muted. The pace on the streets is slower, more somber. People hurry along the canals with their heads down, their faces drawn and anxious. You walk past the tavern where you first witnessed the frenzy of the wind-handle. Asterisk. The door is shut. A few men are gathered outside, not drinking or celebrating, but arguing in low, venomous tones. One man shoves another, shouting about a debt, about a worthless contract. A brief scuffle breaks out before they are separated. It is a scene of recrimination and blame. The camaraderie of the boom has curdled into the bitter resentment of the bust. Asterisk, the fallout is swift and brutal. Thousands of people, from wealthy merchants to humble artisans, are financially ruined. They are holding contracts that oblige them to buy tulip bulbs at prices 10 or 20 times their new, collapsed market value. A bulb that was worth 5,000 guilders a week ago is now worth perhaps 50, if a buyer can even be found. But the contracts are legally binding, or are they? Asterisk, this question plunges the entire country into a legal and moral crisis. This is a well-documented historical fact. In the months following the crash, the Dutch legal system was overwhelmed with tulip-related lawsuits. Buyers who had agreed to purchase bulbs at inflated prices were now defaulting on their contracts en masse. Sellers were suing to force them to pay. The courts were in chaos, unsure how to handle this unprecedented situation. Asterisk, you witness the human cost of this chaos. You see a family's possessions being piled onto the street furniture. Bedding, pots and pans, seized by bailiffs to cover a tulip debt. You hear stories of bankruptcies, of once proud merchants now hiding from their creditors. The social fabric of the city, which seemed so strong and orderly, is tearing at the seams. Asterisk, a quirky, lesser-known detail of the aftermath is the desperate attempts by the government and various guilds to find a solution. They didn't want the entire economy to collapse under the weight of these bad debts. A number of compromises were proposed. In one famous resolution, the courts offered a deal. Buyers could be released from their contracts if they paid the seller a small percentage, perhaps 10% of the original agreed-upon price. This was called the settlement of the wind. But even this was too much for many, and many sellers refused, holding out for the full amount. The legal wrangling would drag on for years, leaving thousands in a state of financial limbo. Asterisk, you think of Willem, the wealthy merchant with the beautiful garden. You find yourself walking down his canal, the Herengrecht, wondering how he has fared. You see him standing on his doorstep, speaking with another merchant. His face, which had been a mask of calm satisfaction, is now grim. He is not ruined. You suspect his wealth was too old and diversified for that, but he has undoubtedly suffered a heavy loss. The pride he took in his collection is likely gone, replaced by a bitter sense of foolishness. The flowers in his garden are no longer symbols of status and genius. They are reminders of a collective madness. Asterisk, historians still debate the true economic impact of the Tulip Mania crash. For a long time, the popular story was that it caused a deep and lasting depression that devastated the Dutch economy for decades. More recent scholarship, however, suggests this was an exaggeration. While many individuals were ruined, the Dutch Republic as a whole, with its robust international trade in spices, textiles, and herring, remained an economic powerhouse. The crash was more of a contained financial crisis than a full-blown economic apocalypse. It was a brutal lesson in speculation, but not a mortal wound to the nation. Asterisk, but this broader economic perspective is cold. Comfort to the people whose lives have been wrecked. You pass the empty stall of the kind-eyed grower who sold you your Beauterre-blown bulb. He is gone. Perhaps he sold his nursery to cover his debts. Perhaps he has simply gone home, his spirit broken. Asterisk, you reach into your pocket and feel the small, hard shape of the bulb you bought. Your little boat, your 5-guilder gamble. In the grand scheme of things, your loss is laughably small, insignificant. But holding the bulb now, you feel a profound sense of disillusionment. It's no longer a token of excitement or a symbol of possibility. It is just an onion, a useless 5-guilder onion. Asterisk, you walk to the edge of a canal and look down at the dark, murky water. For a moment, you are tempted to throw the bulb in, to let it sink to the bottom, along with all the broken promises and shattered dreams. The whole city feels like it's drowning in regret. The bright, vivid colors of the tulips have faded, leaving behind only the sober, monochrome reality of loss. The party is over, and now begins the long, painful process of cleaning up the mess. Asterisk, asterisk, you don't throw the bulb into the canal. Tossing it away feels too much like giving in to the despair that hangs over the city. Instead, you hold on to it, a small, tangible reminder of the whole strange journey. The city of Amsterdam is a wounded place, and its mood is infectious. You feel a need to escape the atmosphere of recrimination and financial ruin. To find a place where a flower can just be a flower again. Asterisk, you travel out of the city, heading north into the countryside. This is the land from which the tulips first conquered the Dutch imagination. It's a flat, expansive landscape, crisscrossed by canals and dominated by a vast, open sky. The windmills turn slowly in the steady breeze, their sails making a soft, rhythmic whooshing sound. It's a landscape of quiet, methodical work, a world away from the frantic energy of the speculative markets. Asterisk. After a long walk, you find what you're looking for. It's not a grand commercial nursery or a wealthy merchant's manicured garden. It's a small, humble plot of land behind a farmhouse, tended by an old woman in a simple apron and a white cap. It is her private garden, her kitchen garden. There are rows of cabbages and leeks, patches of herbs, and at the far end, a single, small bed of tulips. Asterisk, they are in bloom. The spring has finally arrived. Here, under the wide Dutch sky, they are breathtaking. There are no exotic admirals or generals, no priceless viceroyess. These are simple, honest flowers. Solid reds, deep purples, sunny yellows. They are planted not in solitary splendor, but in a cheerful, colorful crowd, nodding their heads in the gentle wind. They are beautiful, not because they are worth a fortune, but simply because they are. Asterisk, the old woman is kneeling in the dirt, carefully pulling up a weed. She sees you watching and gives you a warm, toothless smile. She doesn't ask what you're doing there. She seems to understand that you've just come to look at the flowers. You approach slowly, and she gestures towards the blooms with a calloused hand. Pretty, aren't they? She says, her voice raspy with age. A bit of color after the long gray winter. It cheers the soul. Asterisk, this is the historical reality that persisted long after the speculative bubble burst. Ordinary people continued to grow and love tulips. For the vast majority of the Dutch population, who were never involved in the high-stakes trading, the tulip simply reverted to what it had always been, a beautiful, cheerful flower that heralded the arrival of spring. The mania was an aberration. The simple love for the flower was the norm. Asterisk, you stay there for a long time, just looking. The clean, fresh scent of the blossoms and the damp earth fills your lungs. The sound of a distant church bell drifts on the wind. It is peaceful. The frantic, obsessive world of the connoisseurs, with their tulip books and their fixation on broken patterns, seems ridiculous here. You realize the virus-infected tulips, for all their spectacular beauty, were fundamentally unnatural. Here, in this simple garden, the flowers are healthy, robust, and content. Asterisk, the old woman tells you the names of her flowers. They are not grand or militaristic. She calls the red one Father's Pride and the yellow one Sunshine. She has a quirky personal name for each of them, a folk taxonomy based on memory and affection, not market value. This is a lesser-known aspect of the story, the persistence of a non-commercial, domestic culture of flower growing. While the men in the taverns were gambling on flower futures, women like this were quietly cultivating beauty in their own backyards. For its own sake, asterisk, you think about the question of value. What makes something valuable? The men in Amsterdam thought value was a number, a figure on a contract that could rise to infinity. They believed value was determined by rarity, by prestige, by the collective desire of other men. But here, in this quiet garden, you are learning a different definition. The The value of these tulips is in their color, in their scent, in the way they stand up to the wind. Their value is in the joy they bring to the old woman who tends them. It is a value that cannot be bought or sold, a value that does not crash. Asterisk after a while, you reach into your pocket and pull out your own small, humble bulb, the bouquet. You look at the old woman. Without saying a word, you hold it out to her. She wipes her earthy hands on her apron, takes the bulb from you, and examines it with a practiced eye. A good, strong one, she says with a nod. Yellow, I think. It will be happy here. Your journey is coming to an end. You leave the peaceful countryside behind and return to Amsterdam one last time. The city is still nursing its wounds. The legal battles will continue for years, and the phrase tulpenwoede, or tulip rage, will enter the language as a permanent cautionary tale. But life, slowly and stubbornly, is returning to a semblance of normality. Ships are still arriving in the harbor, merchants are still trading in spices and cloth, and the daily rhythms of work and family are reasserting themselves. The great Tulip Fever has broken, and the city is awakening from a strange and costly dream. Asterisk, you find yourself standing on a bridge, looking down a long canal. The tall, narrow houses stand as they always have, their gabled facades reflected in the dark water. It was in one of these houses that you saw the art, the wealth, and the quiet pride that fueled the desire for a rare flower. It was in the taverns, in the side alleys, that you heard the frantic, hopeful shouts of the wind trade. It was on these streets that you witnessed the silent, collective awe for a single bloom in a window box. The whole drama played out right here, against this backdrop of brick and water. Asterisk, the tulip did not disappear from the Netherlands after the crash. This is the final, crucial historical fact of the story. The speculative mania died, but the horticultural industry survived, and, eventually, thrived. Dutch growers, having learned some hard lessons, focused on cultivating new, stronger, and more beautiful varieties. They became the world's undisputed masters of bulb cultivation. The passion was divorced from the pathology of the financial bubble, and it became a sustainable, long-term industry. Asterisk, the tulip, stripped of its absurd monetary value, was free to become something else, a national symbol. It's a quirky, ironic twist of history. The flower that nearly bankrupted thousands of its citizens, the symbol of their greatest collective folly, was eventually embraced as the quintessential icon of the Netherlands. The image of the tulip, alongside the windmill and the wooden shoe, became a global shorthand for Dutch culture. It's a bit like a man who, after a ruinous gambling addiction, decides to make a pair of dice his family crest. It's a testament to a kind of pragmatic, unsentimental national character and ability to acknowledge a past mistake and, quite literally, make it grow into something beautiful and profitable. Asterisk, you reflect on the journey of the flower itself, from a wild plant on the Central Asian steppes, to a revered object in the Sultan's garden, to a speculative commodity in a Dutch tavern, and finally, to a beloved national emblem. The tulip has been a vessel for so many human emotions: reverence, wonder, greed, ambition, panic, and regret. It has been a mirror, reflecting the desires and delusions of the society that fell in love with it. Asterisk, historians still debate the biggest question of all. Could it happen again? Was Tulip Mania a unique, unrepeatable moment of madness, a product of a specific time and place? Or is it an eternal story, a parable about human nature and the way we create speculative bubbles? Whether the asset is a flower bulb, a .com stock, or a digital currency, the consensus is that the pattern is timeless. The story of the tulip is the blueprint for every boom and bust that has followed. It teaches us that value is a matter of collective belief, and that belief can be a fragile, fickle thing. It shows how easily a crowd can be swept up in a story, especially a story about getting rich without effort. Asterisk, the sun begins to set, casting a long golden light over the canals. The windows of the houses ignite with a warm orange glow. The city, for all its recent trauma, is still beautiful. The memory of the mania will fade, becoming a strange and distant folktale. But the tulips will return, every spring, in gardens and parks and window boxes. They will push up through the dark, cold earth, a splash of brilliant, irrational color in a sober, hard-working land. They will be a quiet reminder of that brief, insane moment when a nation looked at a flower and saw infinity. Asterisk, your journey is over. You have seen the heights of the obsession and the depths of the despair. You have seen the beauty of the flower and the madness of the crowd. And as you turn to leave, you feel a quiet sense of understanding. You understand how a simple plant could become the object of such powerful desire. And you understand, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that the promise of a yellow flower blooming in a country garden next spring is worth more than all the wind in the world. Asterisk, the story is over now, and the canals of old Amsterdam fade into the quiet darkness of your room. The journey is done. Let the echoes of the story recede, like ripples on the water, growing wider and softer until they disappear. There is nothing more to learn, nothing more to analyze. The past can rest now, and so can you. Asterisk, feel the weight of your body, comfortable and supported. Notice the gentle, steady rhythm of your own breathing. A slow breath in, and a long, soft breath out. Each breath is an anchor, holding you in this calm, peaceful moment. Let go of the day, with all its thoughts and worries. They are like the noisy traders in the tavern, and you can simply let them fade into a distant murmur, and then into silence. Asterisk, imagine a single, simple tulip, standing in a quiet field. Its petals are closed for the night, resting. The moon casts a soft, silvery light upon it. The world around it is still and peaceful. There is nothing for it to do but rest, gathering its strength in the cool, dark earth. And just like that flower, there is nothing for you to do now but rest. Allow your mind to become as still and quiet as that moonlit field. Let the gentle darkness soothe you, and allow yourself to drift into a deep and restorative sleep. The story is over. Your night is just beginning. Sweet dreams.